Flick's Barca will always beat Real Madrid unless Vinicius and Kylian Mbappe starts to defend more. There's no manager in this world that will be able to save Real Madrid from the lack of effort if those two don't pull up their shocks even over their necks. Because in this video, you're going to see how the lack of defense from them seriously damaged the ambitions of Real Madrid. As always, do subscribe to the channel. Without wasting time, let's start the video. This is the exact moment where the comeback for Barcelona started, because the mentality and the way of defending for Madrid from this point onward was absolutely shocking. Because they defended in a cowardly way, allowing Barcelona to come through the first phase of build-up. Even with Frenkie or Pedri receiving in the midfield, there was absolutely no pressure on them. And these are the first two guys used to tell your players to not allow time and space on the ball, but they had many chances. Because look at how flat-footed these guys are. Look at Jude Bellingham and Dani Ceballos. They are not defending at all. They are not pushing up and closing down these players. And look at how 4 players are around 2 players. They don't even have a numerical advantage in this situation based on the fact that they are not defending or not closing them down. And Mbappe, at this point, these guys are just waiting for Barcelona's players to come. And this would all change if Mbappe and VINICIUS just does a little bit more defending. Ancelotti was more concerned about closing down the wider areas, as he would instruct his team to shift across in order to close down the spaces for Barcelona. But the threat of Lamine Yamal did not allow them to have Fran Garcia also come into this area right here. Instead, it was Valverde who would drop into that area to keep tabs on Lamine. Valverde had to be defending in a much deeper position due to the fact that Mbappe and VINICIUS are doing very little to help the rest of the team. And this would change so much if they just defend. And look at how much space ultimately are opened up due to the fact that Valverde has to defend a little bit deeper. And this is how you're making it easier for a team like Barcelona to penetrate you. And you can see Valverde even in the back line. And this is just shocking that a manager has to alter his tactics in such a way that it downgrades the team even further. The cracks already started to appear in the half spaces before Madrid even scored their second goal. Because you could see that even if Lamine would receive the ball in these wider areas to be one-on-one, Valverde couldn't really go over and make it a 2-on-1 against Lamine Yamal. That's because of the presence of Dani Olmo. So that would even allow Lamine Yamal to come into the half spaces and receive the ball in that huge gap that they had in order to pull front, and then you would see Eric Garcia get forward into these areas. Absolutely shocking. The tactical awareness of Dani Olmo should really be celebrated, because he pulled Valverde, and you can see Fran was on Lamine in a one-on-one situation. Even this for Madrid was a dire situation. But Olmo kept on pushing Valverde, leaving Fran to put pressure on Lamine, and he followed him everywhere. And Lamine, knowing that, allowed the space for Eric Garcia to be running there. So I don't know why Real Madrid is doing this season after season, and they can get what manager? If they don't improve this, nothing will happen. Ancelotti tried high pressure with Goulet and Mbappe going onto the center backs, where Jude Bellingham and Dani Ceballos would come onto Frenkie and Pedri. But when the ball would be circulated, they would force Barcelona to one side. And also when the ball got into Garcia, VINICIUS was starts to put pressure on him. It was really good from Ancelotti to do this, because you could see Goulet and Mbappe trying to put pressure on the center backs from Barcelona, with Jude and Dani Ceballos putting pressure on the double pivot of FC Barcelona. And it was good to see VINICIUS also doing some defensive work, because he was the one that would put pressure on Eric Garcia whenever he received the ball. The problem with this, however, was the other fullback was in acres of space in the build-up phase for Barcelona. So who would do this? And Arda Güler was in a situation where he had to cover both Gerard Martin and Inigo Martinez. And Pedri and Frenkie altered their positionings as well, meaning that many a times Dani Olmo was receiving the ball in acres of space, also getting Ferran in behind. Poor Goulet didn't know where he was yesterday. I felt bad for the kid, because he didn't know, and he's not tactically aware like most of Real Madrid's players, because they had to cover more than one player. And look at Dani Olmo receiving the ball just in behind the midfield. Imagine receiving the ball constantly in behind the double pivot of Real Madrid. And you can see Ferran was in behind instantly. And this is a huge problem for me for Real Madrid. They don't know how to defend at all. However, Real Madrid just went back into their shell and defending in this space right here. The problem, however, was still with Valverde having to defend in a back five situation, and that just opened up once again the half space for Real Madrid. But Vinicius was actually, Vinicius was actually defending in this area right here, trying to keep tabs on the half space with Eric Garcia trying to draw him out of position. And he also had to keep tabs on Frenkie de Jong, so Vinicius had his work cut out because Eric Garcia was ready to pounce on it. Carlos Ancelotti out here wasting the talent of Valverde in 2025, but you can see here Vinicius in that half space trying to defend. But this is the problem with players having to do two things at once, because he also had to go out and put pressure on the pivots and also on the center backs from the half space area. And you can see that Eric Garcia was ready to take advantage and move into that area. So maybe Ancelotti should have had a different system rather than having a system and altering it. Ancelotti never really sorted out this half space problem, in which Barcelona found a lot of success. Look at the goal from Lamine Yamal, for example. Real Madrid trying to clock down the center with Olmo and Pedri altering their positioning. But then Ferran moves into that space there, and this half space remained open. And you can see that the ball was laid off into Yamal, and Yamal could easily, with a lot of time on his hands, just finish that into the bottom left-hand corner. Now, this is the type of things where managers have to be aware of leaving spaces in the wrong places. This is the problem with the positioning of Valverde. If Valverde was in his position, that half space would have been closed down. And if they were a little bit more ambitious, they would have been able to put pressure on Barcelona. But instead, they just left that half space wide open. Look, there's like 5 players centrally for Real Madrid. And Fran Garcia cannot really focus on Lamine because of Dani Olmo. And Lamine has time and space on the ball. Earlier, I also mentioned that Pedri and Frenkie de Jong also had spaces and time on the ball, which is the wrong players. You cannot have these guys into these half spaces and in the midfield to have all of the time to be able to seriously hurt you. But in the end, this was just a game of how do we stop Barcelona, how do we shut them down, instead of let's implement our playing style, what we want to do, and how can we inflict damage on them. Because Ancelotti had no game plan. They just wanted to shut down Barcelona, play on the transition, and hope to get a result and hope for things to go their way. In fact, in the first half it did, but right after the penalty, the cracks already started happening. And I don't think there's any manager in this world that would be able to save this Real Madrid side unless they sell one of Vinicius or Kylian MBAPPE. Decide who's your best man. As always, do subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next video.